Hello and welcome to News Center. I'm Parikshit Luthra. The decades-long simmering conflict between Israel and Iran has now escalated into a full-blown war, with both Tel Aviv and Tehran training their ballistic weapons on each other. Tehran has said that it has no intention of yielding to international calls for de-escalation days after Israel's surprise attack on Iran's nuclear facilities triggered the worst confrontation between the long-standing enemies. Iran launched a fresh wave of strikes attacking the Tel Aviv city and the port city of Haifa, hours after Israel bombed its capital. At least 8 people were killed. Israeli authorities said that at least 14 people, including children, were also killed in the Iranian strikes over the weekend, as per Iran's health ministry. Over 220 people, mostly civilians, have been killed in Israeli attacks against the country. At least 70 were women and children. The intelligence chief of Iran's Revolutionary Guard and 2 generals were killed in the attacks. Israeli defense minister has warned that that residents will pay the price for Iran's deadly retaliatory strikes. Israel's military said it had hit more than 80 targets in Tehran since Saturday, including the defense ministry headquarters. US President Donald Trump has said that he is hopeful that Israel and Iran can strike a deal. However, he has reiterated that his administration will continue its support for Israel.
Mr. President, can you give us a sense of what you're doing to try to de-escalate the situation between Iran and Israel?
Well, I hope there's going to be a deal. I think it's time for a deal, and we'll see what happens. But sometimes they have to fight it out, but we're going to see what happens. I think there's a good chance there'll be a deal.
The U.S. can continue to support Israel in its defense.
We do, yeah. Thank you very much.
The Iran-Israel conflict is set to be one of the top agenda items in the ongoing meeting of the G7 in Canada. NBC's Alice Barr is here with more on how the G7 is expected to address the escalating tensions in the region.
President Trump is going to be with top allies today at this G7 summit in Canada, and he arrived yesterday with a full plate of issues that he's bringing with him, domestic issues, and then, of course, a lot on the foreign stage to be looking at, with the expanding conflict between Israel and Iran front and center, no question. It comes amid these mounting concerns over a new round of attacks between the 2 major military powers. President Trump saying it's time for a deal to de-escalate, while adding, as you heard there, sometimes they have to fight it out. He promised to keep supporting Israel's defense, though Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is spelling out a little bit more of what that looks like, saying in a new interview that American pilots are helping shoot down drones headed toward Israel. Iran has threatened to strike American military targets if the U.S. continues that assistance to Israel. Lawmakers are calling that a red line, with many in both parties defending Israel's goal of destroying Iran's ability to make a nuclear weapon, while still calling to prioritize diplomacy. U.S. embassy offices are closed in Israel today as this high-stakes conflict grows. And you're right to note this is going to be center stage at the G7 conference ongoing. Exactly how the top economies and the top allies that are gathered there figure out how to address this, and whether there's kind of a formal document or statement that comes out of it, certainly is something that we're going to be watching for as really the meetings get underway in earnest a little bit later today.
The Indian embassies in Tel Aviv and Tehran have issued advisories for Indian nationals in the region. Both the embassies have shared hotline numbers and asked the Indian nationals to stay vigilant. The Indian embassy in Iran has also advised Indians to avoid all unnecessary movements in the country. India's foreign ministry has confirmed that the Indian embassy in Iran also relocated some Indian students to safer locations within the country. Parents of some students stuck in Iran have said that they are awaiting a nod from the government to shift remaining students to safer areas.
अभी 12 बजे मेरी बात हुई मेरी बेटी से, मुश्किल से आधे मिनट बात हुई है। उसने बोला कि हमारी एम्बेसी वालों से मैसेज उन्होंने की थी कि हम आपको किसी सेफर जगह पर शिफ्ट करेंगे, आप रेडी रहिए, लेकिन अभी तक नहीं किया। तेहरान में से कुछ बच्चों को शिफ्ट किया गया है, और जो शाहिद बीएसटी में पढ़ रहे हैं उनको कुछ को आर्मीनिया शिफ्ट किया गया है, लेकिन जो शिराज या और यूनिवर्सिटी में बच्चे हैं अभी उनको शिफ्ट नहीं किया गया है।
And moving on, Prime Minister Narendra Modi finished his first official trip to Cyprus. The visit is the first ever visit by an Indian Prime Minister to the nation in 23 years. This is also Prime Minister Modi's first international trip since Operation Sindoor. PM Modi met the President of Cyprus, where both the leaders discussed ways to boost ties in trade, energy and defence. Cyprus is set to hold the rotating presidency of the EU Council in 2026. India and the European Union have attempted to speed up negotiations for a free trade agreement. Government sources tell CNBC-TV18 that the meetings are now being held on a monthly basis instead of every quarter. 5 more chapters of the deal have been finalized out of the total 23 chapters. Speaking at the India-Cyprus CEO Forum, PM Narendra Modi also said that the India and the European bloc will finalize a trade deal by the end of this year.
पिछले महीने भारत और यूके के बीच एक एम्बिशियस एफटीए पर सहमति बनी है। अब हम भारत और यूके के बीच फ्री ट्रेड एग्रीमेंट को इस साल के अंत तक संपन्न करने के लिए प्रतिबद्ध है। इसकी नेगोशिएशन में गति आई है। इसका लाभ आप सब साथियों को अवश्य मिलेगा।
All right, let me go across to India's former ambassador to Iran, DP Srivastava, someone who was instrumental in negotiating the Chabahar agreement with Iran. Also, he has served on the board of governors of GAIL and also written a book on Pakistan's ideologies, strategy and interests in the current age. Ambassador Srivastava, thank you very much for joining us. Israel is saying they have now achieved full air dominance over Tehran. What is the current position that we are in as far as the Iran-Israel war is concerned? How would you describe the present situation?
Well, I cannot tell you about the ground situation. That only somebody who is present there can tell you. But it's very clear that Iran still has the retaliatory capacity, because even going by Israeli media, Iranian attack has affected some of the Israeli facilities. So it's not yet a conclusive thing. The second point I would like to mention here is that the Israeli attack took place just on the eve of sixth round of US-Iran negotiations. So the timing was very odd and it raises many questions. And the third is that the attack has resulted in strengthening a sentiment in Iran which may be just the contrary of what Israeli attack was supposed to accomplish. There is a debate going on in Iranian Majlis that the country should exit NPT. I do hope that this does not happen and the war is brought to a quick end and there's a resumption of nuclear negotiations.
Right. Ambassador Srivastava, I would also like to ask you about India's stakes in the region. Our exports to Iran in the year 2023 were around $1.6 billion worth of goods. Could you give us a sense of how many Indians are there in Iran? What is the stake of the Indian industry there? And how could there be a setback? Currently, we believe that a lot of Indians are trying to leave. I think the embassy is also advising citizens to leave as soon as possible. Could you give us a sense of how we are getting impacted directly on in a sort of a people way when it comes to our own citizens getting impacted?
I believe there are about 1,000 to 1,200 Indians there, and this includes about 600 odd students. And I understand that the embassy is trying to arrange for evacuation of these students. There are two different, through land route because the airspace is closed. And there are two different options. One is northwest through Azerbaijan. And the other is slightly to the northeast through Turkmenistan. So it's a very difficult situation because Iran is a large country, so the land route itself will mean traversing something like 600 to 800 kilometers over land before they reach the border post.
Right. Definitely a very difficult situation there. Sir, in terms of the Chabahar port, now this was a critical, probably a cornerstone of India-Iran engagement and cooperation for the future. 2015 is when we had signed an agreement on the Chabahar port. In 2024, we renewed it as a long-term contract. How do you think the Iran-Israel war could impact the cooperation on Chabahar port? And do you feel that has already been impacted over the last few days?
You know, one small correction, that the original agreement, which I had negotiated in 2015, that itself was for 10 years, and a contract was signed in the presence of Honorable Prime Minister next year for 10 years. Now,
Right.
coming to the current status, the project implementation has been slow, partly because of the sanctions, and in the current situation, it's simply not possible to carry on work. This will last as long as the hostilities continue and the sanctions continue.
How do you think India-Iran relations are set to suffer a setback because of the current war between Israel and Iran?
We have excellent relations with both the countries. India has taken a measured approach and called for de-escalation. So I don't think that there will be a setback to our relations with Iran, but it is, of course, not possible to carry on normal trade and investment apart from Indians in Iran. In case the war spreads, this will affect the larger Indian diaspora in the Middle East, and there's a larger diaspora of 7.1 million in the Middle East.
Right. What's now the possibility of a larger involvement of the US, of the UK and other Western powers in the war, even though Donald Trump has gone on to say that if there is any attack by Iran on US, then the Iranian people, the Iranian government will feel the full force of US attacks?
I do hope that this situation does not come to pass, because we have to bear in mind that this region accounts for 20% of world's oil supply. The oil prices were on a downward trajectory before the Israeli attack of 14 June. Since then, there has been 7% increase. In case of India, $1 increase in the price of oil adds something like 14,000 crore rupees to India's annual import bill. It will have a similar effect on other oil countries, because even though India is not importing any oil from Iran, and that also applies to other countries, it's in, you know, if the Hormuz Strait is closed, this will affect 20% of world's oil supplies, and there is simply no way that that this can be replaced.
Absolutely. And that is a big worry for India and the world. And it remains to be seen, though many have said that this would be the last resort by Iran to actually shut down the Strait of Hormuz. But the fact is they can do that. Thank you very much, Ambassador Srivastava, for joining us on that big story. We're taking a short break, but when we return, we're going to speak about the GST Council meeting, which will be held over the next few weeks, and what are some of the changes related to compensation cess. Remember, compensation cess had received an extension to 2026, and there's now talk of replacing it with a clean energy and health cess. There is also an issue of rate rationalization. We are going to discuss all those preliminary discussions with Mr. Nagendra Kumar, who has been a member GST earlier. That's coming up.